So firms become larger, but in a sense less dense in that, and more fluid, that they're ecosystems, and you describe Lianfeng, a Chinese company, and obviously we know the ecosystem around Apple and so on. But where people really, less and less regard themselves as employees and regard themselves as individual contributors, but have a place in this broader ecosystem. What does this mean for the role of managers? You talk in the book about the fact that the notion of the general manager is maybe kind of under threat, and that, I don't know how our colleagues in the business school see that, but that was our business, is training general managers. And of course, companies like GE put great store, and Shell and so on, these people could move from country to country, division to division with these great general management skills. And you're saying, that may not be very valuable as the new economy unfolds.
Yeah, I think general management could be valuable if what you've got is difficult to imitate and brings value. But I think actually lot of what's called general management is just actually what I would call shallow skills. And if you don't know very much, if you know a little bit about lots of things, I think that puts you in a very precarious position, because there's loads of people who know a little bit about lots. And so, one of the suggestions I'm making in the book is that we think about building mastery. And by that, I mean that we, each of us, concentrate on learning something, on building a set of networks that are valuable, that are difficult to imitate, that are potentially in the areas that we see the world going in. And then, of course, you can morph into something else, or you could, actually jump completely into something entirely different. If we're going to work until we're 70 or even 80, there's a lot more opportunity for these multiple careers. But of course, to do that, we have to rethink the way we think about careers. And so the idea that a career is something that, you first of all, you do some education, and then you take some time off, and then you work for the rest of your life. That's completely defunct. And I don't know if organizations have quite understood that yet. And I'm not sure if we understand that yet, that actually we have to be prepared to invest in what we might call our human capital right the way through our lives. And Gary, I completely agree with you that we are very foolish if we think that our networks are held simply in Facebook. Actually, one of the things I've said in the book is that our value over time, both to ourselves and to our communities and to organizations, will be based on three sorts of networks. One is, what I call the posse, the people. Gary, I think in the book I mentioned you as a member of my posse. Somebody you can phone up and they give you some wise advice really quickly. You can talk in your usual business, gobbledygook, and they understand it. That's really important, because actually you need people around you with great ideas. The second is the big ideas crowd, which are people who are completely different from you. And then thirdly, we're coming back to your earlier point, is what I call the regenerative community. And what I say is, if you take a look at the likely fragmentation of work, plus it becoming much more virtual, plus families breaking up, plus mobility, you do find yourself in a place where people are going to be sitting in apartments feeling pretty lonely.
Yeah, where you come to really in the end of the book, having described all these trends and how they're going to play out, it's really three areas of advice, I guess you would say. One is around this need to build deep mastery. One is around the need to build, real networks of real relationships, as well as the extended kind. And then thirdly, worrying maybe more about the quality of our experiences and less the quantity of our consumption. Maybe let me unpack those just for a moment. Mastery is something that's pretty hard to build. You and I had the luxury of doing it in a world where we had a lot fewer disruptions, right? You kind of go back and forth in the book between life as it is now, life maybe 20 years ago. How do you build, what is the practical disciplines that people have to build mastery and that deep expertise that you can trade in the global economy in the midst of all these interruptions and all of the need to live at least some sort of a balanced life?
Well, I think you build mastery in two ways. it's partly, well, actually, in three ways, if we think about something else I'm going to add. I mean, it's partly about your intellectual capital, so you have to know something deeply. It's partly about your social capital, which is that you have to build relationships with people who also know something deeply and for whom you can gain, a great deal initially in a sort of apprentice way. And then also you've got to build emotional capital that allows you the time and the space to concentrate. I mean, one of the things you spoke about earlier, Gary, is fragmentation. And I'm actually deeply worried about that. I'm deeply worried about the fact that when I get executives on my programs at London Business School, as soon as we stop talking, the first thing they do is to switch their Blackberries on and to do their emails. And and I've spoken to them quite a lot about that and said, look, one of the implications of that is that we've now, had this great conversation. And what would be really smart right now is for you to reflect on it, to think about it, to think about how it fits with you. And actually, they weren't giving themselves permission to do that reflection. And I think there's a real challenge there, that in fragmentation, we lose the capacity to really understand something deeply. And so what we move towards instead is this superficiality, which I think is going to be very problematic. Because frankly, if you are competing with loads of people in the world, you've got to have something that's different.